Um, Thinking of grief and experiencing going in and out of grief um, with hurt. Not, I haven't experienced grief like some others have, in um, how they've experienced it personally, with family or with loss in that way. Um, so, but thought maybe we'd get started. We could talk about a couple different things. I have some points to go through, different thoughts on that, and maybe it'll be useful to somebody. It's been useful to me to go through some of these. Um, so before we begin, um, I'd like to be very clear that I am not a mental health professional or counselor, and I really don't feel equipped to talk about this because I haven't experienced pain like others have. Um, but my experience is mine, and other people's experience is theirs. So, what I'm sharing tonight comes from my own experiences, from conversations with many people who have left or hurting. Um, what I've learned is uh, these things while I'm trying to understand my own healing process and my own journey here. Um, so many of us expected that once we left, we'd simply feel relieved and maybe move forward with life. It would just be easy and simple and clean. And um, maybe some of us did feel some relief, but we also may have felt, sadness, anger, confusion, loneliness, guilt, fear. It often, leaving involves real loss, and loss can lead to grief. So it was probably a couple of years, maybe no, not a couple of years. It was probably about a year into um, into processing what to do and how to proceed, when I realized that I was grieving. I was going in and out of the grief process. I was grieving something I lost, and I didn't understand what was happening. But as I worked through it, it kind of become more clear. So um, many of us didn't lose just one thing. Uh, there were several losses, maybe experienced at the same time, piled on top of each other. So friendships, community, family, um, could be some of those. So everybody, I'm sure, has maybe a different answer to that. So that's one reason, because of that layered effect. That's one reason why the grief can feel so heavy and confusing. So tonight's not really about deciding whether someone was right or wrong to leave or to stay, or it's not about debating doctrine. It's not about recognizing that many of us are grieving and understanding that grief um, can be a normal part of what we're feeling, what we're going through, and part of healing. So it's a time that we can process through that hurt a little bit. um, some of the things that are mentioned tonight may connect deeply with you. Other parts may not, and that's okay. Uh, Everybody's circumstances and positions are in a different place, so totally okay. So part one, the first thing I had was, what is grief? What is it? Um, I always associated grief with death. It was always a thing that was tied to death, and it's a loss. But um, so we understand that when somebody dies, people who love them will grieve. Clearly, that's the connection we make. Um, but it's broader than that. It's bigger than that. So grief is a response to losing something that mattered to us. Uh, any meaningful loss or ending or change. Um, we can grieve a person, a relationship, a community, the way we've always done it, the way of life type thing, sense of identity, the expected future. We can grieve safety. We can grieve trust. So lots of things, and that list could go on and on and on. But and then the thing that the layers part of it, that leaving the two by twos or any church system or community system can involve several of those losses all at once. So it's not just one; it's hitting multiple parts. So some of us left because we felt we had no other healthy choice. Some left because we no longer believed certain teachings, and some left because we were hurt by people in or out, or even our family, some bad situations. Some left gradually, some left super fast, dropped everything and walked. Um, lots of different ways there. So regardless of how we left, um, many of us experience loss. So loss plays the deepest part into that, and um, difficult difficult to maybe process. Um, so it doesn't grief being being filled with grief or experiencing grief doesn't prove that leaving was wrong or right. Um, but it many times makes people second guess themselves. They question if they're doing the right thing, or if their decision was right, or what um, they're asking the question, if leaving was right, why am I so sad, or why do I miss people, why do I feel lonely, um, why do I still care? A lot of people have questioned that. It's not proof that somebody made a wrong decision. It's it's our brain processing the loss that we're experiencing. So a person could believe that leaving was necessary and still miss the relationships, the traditions, the familiarity, the comfort, the belonging. We can miss all those things. Um, we can grieve also while also recognizing that, um, well, we can grieve while recognizing that returning would not be healthy either. So just because we're grieving doesn't necessarily mean that it's something we should turn back to. And I mean, some people do, but this isn't a time of judgment. This is just kind of stating out some of those things. The thing that I've figured out is that grief is personal. It's really personal. My grief and the way I respond to it is different than yours or your neighbors or anybody else's. Probably some overlaps, but there's no single way. There's not a way to do it. So one person may really miss the community, and another person may feel totally relieved at that change, at walking away from that. Um, you can grieve lost relationships, and others may be grieving the lost faith or whatever's come from it for you. Um, and then sometimes people grieve immediately, and then others can grieve over time, and it might not set in for a while. I think I've kind of rode the roller coaster of in and out of it, with um, finding joy, finding excitement, and then going through fear and feeling deeply like uncertain, and that's something that is it's hard. So um, so so if we establish that our grief is our response to loss, um, the next question is what what might we actually be grieving? What are we grieving? And that answer, obviously, all of these answers are going to be quite different for everybody. But again, um, some of them, I'll list a couple out: community and belonging, missing their people, missing the. I mean, some people love conventions, missing convention, missing not being invited to weddings, not having shared friends or commonality with other people. Those are things that some people miss. Other people miss, the meetings or whatever. But Um, it's the social side of it. Some people miss that. Other people are very okay with that not being a part of it. So, um, yeah, so the community, um, missing community doesn't mean that someone should have stayed. It means connection and belonging. It means the group, the people mattered to them, and they still can. Um, Humans need community overall, some more than others. I'm massively a community creature. Um, and feeling that loss is not a weakness. That's not a thing to be shamed of or ashamed or feel like you're less than because of it. Another thing is missing the relationships, which is tied to community. Um, but losing friendships, we sure most people here or that have gone through any steps have lost some relationships, or they've changed. If they haven't lost them, they've changed. Hopefully, not too dramatically, unless they needed to. But relationships with parents or siblings and children and um, people who felt like family, people who felt like your best friends, um, can it changes. It can change, and that's worth grieving because that's a thing that we lose, that we thought we had a very secure thing there that can go away. So some of those relationships can end suddenly, which is even more traumatic to that end. Um, but some remain, and um, they can, who knows, with time. Um, we may we may feel some or all of these things I listed out: rejected, misunderstood, abandoned, judged, forgotten, replaced. And then I think one of the hardest ones is afraid to speak honestly. Um, the list is kind of a list of things that other people do to us, but then the last one, afraid to speak honestly, that's a massive one because I think we generally um, struggle to um, to be brave. I don't know if bravery is even the thing because you're tackling you're excuse me, you're you're tackling a system up front, and people that don't want to see anything outside of that are difficult to get through to. So, and those other feelings when somebody turns you away, it's a hard, tough thing to feel. So, um, anyway, so a couple questions that I kind of I write myself questions, um, and my answers again, what relationships changed after I left? There were some. I've lost some friends. I've gained an immense amount of friends. Um, what people do I miss? I miss people. There are some people that I was close to. Did I lose a relationship completely, or did the nature of it change? And that's probably the reality of most of mine. For me, is that they're not the people in my pocket that I thought I had there. But there's been others that have been. There's a lot of people out there that want to show love and care to us as well. So um, anyway, so we um, third one kind of I wrote was identity. So we can grieve a lost identity. Um, Going to meetings for a lot of us was our identity. It wasn't necessarily the act of going to meeting, but being of the group, being being saved, being the we didn't say saved, but being the feeling of belonging there. And again, a lot of these go to community, but there's so much overlap and so much extra. Um, Somebody who believed or understood themselves as being in the truth, um, being an elder, that was a sense of belonging, sense of identity. It was who I was. It made who I was, and I grew up because of it. So there was some good that came from some of those things. But anyway, some people, their identity is that they go to every meeting. Some people, they're open home, and some people are convention families. Um, anyway, so our identities, so we can grieve those things, because when you think you have yourself figured out who you are and who you're going to be and who you're going to be forever, and then that changes, that's it's a tough thing to grab. Um, and there's going to be some required work to get through some of these, to process the hurt that we have internally. And this is the whole thing with grief, is it's not somebody else's pain necessarily. It's what we feel internally, um, that others might not even see. So yeah, so after leaving, part of the identity thing, people may ask, well, who am I now? Um, how do I describe myself, who I am? What do I actually believe now? What values are truly mine? What parts of me are me instead of just from a group? Um, can I still love God outside this group? This is not a this is not a religious, spiritual talk. I didn't plan on bringing really God into it much, except for me, it's important. But um, this is part of who we are, depending on where our walk has taken us and where our belief and our faith is. But it all kind of goes together in that way, because when we're hurting, we start questioning, and being raised not allowed to question, or not thinking that it's okay to question, not by my parents necessarily, but by the structure, by the system. Um, Now I've given myself permission, and I've given other people permission around me to have their own thoughts, to have their own questions, their own minds, and I can love them all the same. So that's my goal. Um, anyway, so not knowing. Um, oh, so identity loss is part of what that was about. Identity loss can feel disorienting, because we're not only leaving a group, we're learning how to understand who we are, and without the group, and that's a heavy lift for a lot of people. So to that point, just because you're working through that, finding your identity, doesn't really mean that you don't have one. It doesn't mean that you don't count, you don't matter. It means that you're finally being given room to discover it. You're figuring that out. So I'm dealing with this next one a little bit at times, and it's certainty. So I was very certain in what I believed. I was very well. I was certain, but I didn't understand. So many of us grew up with firm answers about God and salvation and the Bible and church and ministry, and uh, some of us had firm answers on baptism and appearance. We knew what was right, worldliness, who was right and who was wrong. These are things that how life should be lived. These are things we were certain about. So it can feel safe to be certain. So when we start to lose some of that certainty, that that can make things pretty scary. We can grieve. Um, Sorry, I gotta find my charger. We can grieve some of that loss of that certainty. So um, when long-held beliefs fall apart, we can start feeling untethered, spiritually untethered. So We can ask, was any of it true? Can I trust the Bible? Can I trust anybody else? Can I trust a church? Can I trust, what if I'm wrong? This is my question that I keep, not that I have doubt in this, but every now and then something will come up and I'll have this grumbling deep down that's like, but what if you're wrong? And the anyway, I can go into that at some point, maybe a different time, but the feeling like the grief and questions are tied together here, because it's uncertainty. It's a loss of that complete for sureness that we tended to have. Um, so that uncertainty can be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be dangerous. That was one of I don't know where I heard that. It was a quote that I heard, but it can be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be dangerous. And I think that's probably the thing that's helped me to grasp some of that better. So, still talking about things we can grieve, things we might be grieving. Loss of trust, another one for me. Um, I've heard quite a few times, I don't know who or what to trust anymore. We can lose trust in leaders, um, in our friends, in our friend group, in our church, in God, in Scripture, and um, well, there's lots of things we can lose trust in. Um, so those are some we can lose trust in our own judgment sometimes. I mean, that's part of it. So I think there's lots that we can we can lose trust in on that front. Um, so many of us believed we were part of a uniquely safe and trustworthy group. Um, then abuse, dishonesty, manipulation, um, betrayal, when they come to light, that sense of safety collapsed. So that was my place where I was at, I just couldn't get past that. Um, and it can reach beyond the church. It's not just about the church on that front. So because then I started wondering, well, how did I not see this? I've said that so many times over the last couple of years. How did I not see this? Like how, whatever it is, whether it was doctrinal or abuse wise or anyway, it made me question everything. And can I trust any leaders? Is there anything I can trust? How do I trust my own instincts? Because start to doubt if you can even make good decisions because there's so many things that you just don't really. Anyway, it's loss of trust. Trust is earned, but loss of trust can be very expensive for a person. So um, I just now got my comments section pulled up here, and it wasn't loaded on my page. So I see everybody saying hi. So thank you. And yeah, so on trust, wrote one last thing. Um, it doesn't have to be rebuilt quickly. It doesn't. There's no right time on rebuilding that trust and working through that. Uh, it's um, healthy trust is usually built slowly, and it's built through honesty, consistency, uh, setting boundaries, and evidence. All the things that I didn't think was actually being trusting. Those are the things that build trust. Um, and then learning to trust yourself again, maybe one of the hardest and most important parts of the entire healing process and working through. And I've gone into trusting myself, and then I've gone out of it. It's the cycles continue to repeat, and they go in and out, in and out. So that's difficult because owning that and dealing with that is, um, yeah, it's tough. Um, I think, let's see here. Yeah, so I have one or two more points here on what we're grieving. Um, Missed opportunities, time. Um, I've heard several, especially seems like workers, ex-workers, have um, have stated that they've lost so much of their life. They've given so much of their life. Um, you know, my computer's telling me I'm having streaming issues. um, so hopefully this is still connected. All right. So um, yeah. So I gave so many years. I gave my childhood to this. I gave my adult life to this. And for the ex workers, it's even more the case. Um, but even for there are things that like I said earlier, I finding joy in certain things. There's certain times where I've looked at it and I'm like, man, I could have had this joy for a long time. I could have had this thing going on with me now that I have, that I'm finding, that I'm learning, and I didn't. I didn't have that. Um, so good. So looks like maybe maybe you lost me for a minute, but which is probably good. It's probably better for you that way. So yeah. So but it's for me it was hard. It was hard to grasp um, at the time, and now it's pretty clear that there's so much to be excited about. There's um, so much to look forward to, but but it's easy to sometimes um, dwell in and dwell isn't a bad word. Um, Dwell isn't necessarily a negative word because it's dwell in the hurt or the grief of thinking that, man, I gave up a lot for this, and and that's true. It's probably true. So let's see here. Um, hmm. So a couple of things I commented on, that thinking of losing time because it's the one thing we can't get back. Uh, that can bring a lot of some emotions, and I wrote out anger, regret, shame, sadness, resentment. Those are the things that, like, when you think you've lost time, you've lost something you can't get back. That those are the reactions, the human reactions that's extremely real to me. And I wrote that because that's me. That's what I mean. Some of the things that I've experienced at this point, going, well, I should have should have seen this, but um, anyway. And then for people that have given, people that have gone into the work, into the ministry of some sort, um, and then question that later, they've given up their some of their best years, so their peak years, the opportunity for education, the careers, friendship, dating, travel, hobbies, um, a lot of things that they've given up. So I think it's important and really honest to acknowledge the lost time and missed opportunities, and for even each for me, um, and I think that it's needed for us to grasp that, to process it, because my again my experience in processing the the hurt, the frustration and the grief of of everything that's gone on, and where I'm at now is that well, I I don't I it's anyway. I'm not exactly sure where I was going there, so I'll start over. Um, so we can grieve what was lost without hating who we were. I guess that's the point. Like we don't have to dislike or be ashamed or be angry and shameful and sad and frustrated and regretful because of what we were, who we were, but we can dwell in the today, in the current, and be glad and thankful for where we are now, maybe. So um, yeah, and then the last point that I had written down is similar to that one, where it's um, I thought this would look different, is kind of the future we thought we would have. So that kind of ties. It's mostly overlapping on that. So um, the central point, really, for me is that we're typically I have grieved what I thought I had, and um, sometimes we grieve something that was clearly present and then it disappeared, and other times we grieve what we believed we had. So we may grieve all these things I just talked about, or more probably. It doesn't make it easier. So, but we can grieve a friendship that we believed was unconditional, a community we believed would always stand beside us, leaders we believed were trustworthy and honest, a system we believed would protect vulnerable people, um, a spiritual home we believed was safe, a certainty we believed could never be questioned, um, a belief that everyone was honest, a belief that the system worked the way we were told it worked. These are all things that, like, it stirs up this grief. This is to me, which for me is unfortunately turns up as anger sometimes, where it's like it's unbelief that this could happen. Um, it may make it more complicated though, because we're facing uh, again back to the layers. We're facing the layers of it. So the first loss is the relationship, community, certainty or sense of safety. And the second loss is the realization that what we believed may not have existed in the way we thought it did. So that's kind of like the secondary wave of hurt. Um, so we process through the first thing, and then the realization that, oh wait, this wasn't exactly what we thought. Um, that hurts. So we may be grieving what was lost, but we also may be grieving what was never there. Um, anyway, but it's the ground. It's a feeling of the ground shifting beneath our feet is really what it is. So um, I was I was so sure. I was so sure in everything. Um, yeah, I just it's when I was thinking about this and putting it together. There's several stories that could be told, but um, just thinking that, like, the certainty that that everybody that was around me was um, had my best interest at heart. That had that the ministers, the overseers, the workers were, and there are some that have treated me very not very well. But when I asked questions of the leadership, that there was no answers. So um, yeah, so those are the things like that brought a deep grief to me on that front. Um, so I was reading a couple comments here. The biggest grief is thinking that we were going to confront in unity the evil that had been revealed, and finding out many didn't even see or believe that there was a system was upheld above righteousness. Yeah, that's Greg. Yeah, that's even like my story. Like when I'm asking a question to our overseer or overseer, that it was met with silence or a rebuff. That brought me to a point where I was like that put me into a tailspin. Um, so yeah, I yes, there's some hard things to process that, and each one of us have to process in our own way. And um, this is later. I had this written down later, I know, but with that thought, like there is a time and a place to seek help. So, and it's acceptable and it's not shameful. Um, I've had to go get help. So, um, professional help, not some hack talking on a YouTube live or a Facebook live about grief. Um, anyway, there's a time and a place for that, and it's not to be taken lightly when you get to that point. um, so, what does grief look like? Um, we I always want everything to follow this. This is the path that I have it set out for, and this is what it should look like, right? So, um, but it doesn't really follow that predictable straight line A to B type thing. Um, it we imagine that we'll feel bad for a while and then feel better and then move on, and that's it, easy peasy. So, but it doesn't work that way quite that neatly. It's not. It can be pretty messy. It can be inconsistent and contradictory, to say the least. Right when you think you've got it all figured out is when it goes back to get you. So, um, at the same time, like I think we can feel like joy and sadness, relief and sadness. We can feel anger and love. We can feel freedom and loneliness, hope and fear. These opposite feelings can exist at the same time. Anyway, so um, if your emotions have felt unpredictable, grief may be one of the reasons. Um, it took me, there were several times I was talking to people close to me and I'd be like, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And then I started to realize like, oh, I'm processing hurt and pain and loss. So it's also important to recognize that grief is not only possible, um, not the only possible cause of emotional distress. So trauma, depression, anxiety, abuse, physical health concerns, family conflict, those all may be involved. Um, those all may be involved. And anyone who feels unable to function or feels unsafe in any of those things should realize it's okay and and seek help, um, because it's yes, Greg. It's a good therapist will help you make sense out of all the emotional mess. Finding the right one, and there's good help out there. Um, Sadness is a part of it. I miss what I had is the quote that I wrote. Um, it's it looks like depression to a degree. It could be crying, a heavy feeling, losing motivation, feeling that something is missing, avoiding reminders of what you had or where you were or what you've done before, uh, longing, looking for familiar people or routines, or wishing you had that familiarity. Um, that's there's no I got no magic wands for most of these things, any of these things. But sadness does not necessarily mean a person um, wants to return to the way it was before. but it's dealing with the thing that we've lost. Um, it yeah. So anger is another symptom. Um, my quote was, "This should not have happened," and it can be directed towards a whole plethora of people or groups, um, from God all the way down to the lowest of the low. So yeah, we can have anger. That's a normal response to grief. So people may feel angry because they felt deceived, they felt betrayed, um, abuse was mishandled, questions were dismissed, um, they angry over lost relationships, that they gave years of their lives away, they remained silent, angry at themselves for that, um, or they defended people or teachings that they now question or realize that they might have been off base on it. But anger is connected to the recognition that something valuable was taken, violated, or mishandled. Like that's the gist of it. I had a big star next to that line. So it's not necessarily wrong to be angry. It's okay to be angry. Healthy anger can help us recognize injustice and set boundaries, um, to speak honestly, to protect others, to refuse further harm. Um, it's what we do with the anger that matters, I think, and and it's how we process through our pain, our hurt. So, I mean, anybody that's been around kids much can understand uncontrollable anger and the hurt that it can cause as well. So it's hard to, I mean, it's hard to maybe have that control over that. But anyway, but again, professional support and close knit group, community helps with that. So confusion, um, is another part of it. I don't know what to think anymore. I've heard that. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to think anymore. People may feel disoriented after leaving, or because their former framework or their group uh, had everything explained very neatly and nicely. Well, it's not really all neat and tidy and in a bow and easy. So so that leads us to be confused. That leads us to question, what do I believe? Was any of it real? What parts were true? Who can I trust? What happens next? Uh, do I need to find another church? I saw some comments. Daryl, I see you talking about stuff, and I appreciate that. And I can't wait to go back and read them all. Um, anyway, yeah, finding a place, finding a community, figuring out how in a safe way, and being okay to say, I don't think that was what I'm looking for, and move on, and that's okay. Um, yeah, this isn't part of confusion, but to that degree, to finding another place is hard, because when you come out of what we've come out of, and I think Alyssa, um, Klink wrote today about this, but when you come out of a place and you are committing yourself to it fully, as we have, it's really hard to not commit yourself fully to the next thing. And it's it's um, it's healthy to go experience some other things and go to other churches, or don't go to church at all, and experience and just study and read and process your own self, hopefully with God. But that's my stand. However you're processing, and anyway, it can feel frightening because it's confusing. It is just but it's part of rebuilding. And not knowing is uncomfortable, but it's not failure. Um, just thinking about this now, it seems like most of these things are all really deeply about giving ourselves permission to process through, giving ourselves the right, the allowance to think about things in a way that we haven't thought about them before, and to deal with things in a way we haven't dealt with before. Anyway, um, another one that happens to me still is anxiety and fear. So what if I made a mistake? Um, anxiety of being spiritually wrong, of losing salvation, of disappointing God, hurting my family, losing relationships, being judged, being misunderstood. Um, yeah, those are tough. So, um, and those are worthy of grieving. It's worthy of being um, feeling that we've lost something. And how do those things show up? Anxiety is essentially what this is: difficulty sleeping, racing thoughts, muscle tension, panic, stomach problems, constant worry, irritability, difficulty concentrating. Um, some people, some people remain on high alert even after, um, even after they're no longer in the environment that produced the fear, that made that anxiety so deep, because our body is still processing it. Doesn't mean they're weak, but it means that their mind and body are still learning that they're safe. And so that's not just people who are physically abused. That's not just people who are hurt um, physically. That's a deep thing. Um, yeah. So um, the last one, I think it's the last one I got here, is on this, is loneliness. Um, Nobody understands what I'm going through. That's the So former members may feel lonely even when they're surrounded by kind and supportive people. Um, I'm a grade A extrovert, so I don't necessarily feel lonely very often because I seek people out. I have no problem with that. It's in my wheelhouse. It's my comfort zone. So um, so this doesn't really affect. I haven't felt this so much. I know others that are not comfortable putting themselves out and seeking out people in groups and community, um, and it's a big deal. Really difficult. So yeah, so that's hard. And the couple things that people that are people who feel lonely, even when they're surrounded by and kind people, they the language is different, the culture is different. All these things are different, um, and that makes us feel separated out and lonely. And that yeah, Daryl, great point. Grief is intensely private, isn't it? And it is, and it's so personal. It's so unique to each person. And this is the thing. So going through these, I was like, well, that that actually makes a lot of sense. But I was seeing all these that were made a lot of sense to me because that's how it's processed for me. But yeah, it's quite a thing. So um, we're about to the point where um, I'm running out of anything useful, if there was anything useful to say. Um, but a couple of closing thoughts that I had. Um, if there's one thing that I hope anybody takes away from tonight, it's that grief after leaving or loss is normal, and even more important, it's acceptable. It's not something to be filled with shame. It's not something that we have to process out loud. It's something that we have to process ourselves. Um, the fact that you're grieving from yesterday or today or last week or next week, it doesn't mean that the decision you made is wrong. It means your brain is trying to catch up to what is going on. And it means that something mattered to you and you got hurt. So healing doesn't happen um, by pretending we did not lose anything. So that was kind of one of my biggest takeaways was the realization that I could pretend that I'm okay. I could pretend that everything's fine. But when I realized that like I wasn't truly healing at that point, but when I finally accepted and started to really work through the things that I felt like I lost, is when that started. So um, angry, anger, relief, confused, wherever you are tonight, um, you're not behind. You're not losing, and even more importantly, you're not alone. So there are people out there. Um, I'm here. I see a lot of faces I know on here, but a lot of names I know. But anyway, there are people that care, and that's the thing to understand. And like there's just so many ways that to get help, but we have to be willing for it. And sometimes the only way to get help is to walk through it. Um, grief. I don't know where I read this. Grief is not the end of the story. So I was, yeah. It can be the beginning of honesty, um, and honestly facing what happened and learning how to live again. So anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for being with me and listening to me ramble for 56 minutes. And yeah, I hope each person can process and find out how to deal with the hurt that you're dealing with. And I mean, it'd be great if whoever's here is not feeling that, because that's the goal. Because um, yeah, our hearts in general want to heal. They want to be happy. They're seeking for joy. That's the way we're made. So anyway, much love to y'all, and yeah, have a great week.